All right, welcome back to today. We're going to talk about contracts. Real estate is built and driven on contracts. Everything we do is a contractual obligation. Everything from hiring an agent, to the buyers and sellers, to the counteroffers, to the closings, to the passing of the title. All of that is built on contracts. So we're going to talk about how contracts work. We're going to talk about all about the elements that are in every contract, how you use them, and the different types of wordings that could potentially mean two things. All right, so we're going to start there on page 202. A contract is a voluntary agreement or promise between legally competent parties supported by legal consideration to perform or not perform some legal act. All right, I read that to you because I exactly wanted you to hear there are 5 elements of a contract. Every contract has to have all 5 elements for it to be a valid contract. Those elements are voluntary. You cannot force someone into a contract. The old days of taking someone in the back room and breaking their knees until they sell the building, you know, like the mafia used to, you can't do that. It's not that's not voluntary. So a contract has to be voluntary between both parties to enter into it. It has to be an agreement or a promise to do something. So there has to be some action on both sides of the table, whether it's giving them money and signing a deed. That's the agreement, all right? Those are the 2 actions that we deal with. It's made by legally competent parties. Got to be of sufficient mental capacity to understand the outcome of the deal. So, not an IU grad. Ethan, how was it last night? But there's 2 halves to a football game. And then IU went in at halftime and never came back out. It was still going on at 11:15? It was like the end of the 3rd quarter last night. Yeah. So you got to have sufficient mental capacity to understand, and you got to be of sufficient age. In Indiana, it's got to be 18 to transfer real estate. All right? It's got to have lawful consideration. What is consideration? In real estate, it's money. Remember, we talked about the marriage contract. Have we talked about the marriage contract? The marriage contract, and I told you then it was a contract. And the consideration was love, honor, and cherish, because love has value between people that are getting married. In real estate, we sell at what's called an arm's length transaction. Arm's length means I don't know the other party. So therefore, love, honor, and cherish has no value. We can't use that. We have to use something else, which we use money in real estate. And you can't charge money for love. That's a whole different crime. Come on, it's Friday. All right? And it has to be for some legal act, obviously. So if you ever watched The Sopranos and they talked about it taking a contract on somebody, that's not a legal act, so that's really not a contract. Okay? So you have to have all parts of that contract to be enforced and valid for the contract to be actually valid. Now, like agency was the other day, we talked about the 2 types of agency. Contracts work the same way. A contract can be written or it can be oral in general. In real estate, contracts must be written. There is a word called the statute of frauds. The statute of frauds. The statute of frauds says, it's there on the bottom of the page, some contracts are so important that they must be in writing. Real estate contracts are those. You cannot have an oral listing agreement. You can't have an oral purchase agreement. You can't have an oral deed. All of those have to be in writing to be enforced. All right? So while contracts can be oral or written, real estate contracts have to be written. All right? No such thing as oral contracts. Okay? Now, contracts have 2 flavors. The first flavor is an express contract. Just like express agency, where both parties understood the agency, and express contract, both parties understand the contract. All right? Tiffany, I'll wash your car for $20 today. Yes or no? Say no. No. Because I ain't doing it. If she said yes, that is actually a contract. That's an oral contract. It's express. I will wash her car. She will pay me $20. We both know our side of the deal. $20 is consideration. Washing a car is a legal act. We're both of legal age. We're going to both do something. She's giving me money. I'm washing the car. So that is an express contract. That one just happens to be oral. In real estate, they have to be in writing, okay? Another contract is what's called implied contract. An implied contract, just like the agency, is where one party or the other must know, or knows their half. All right? It may not be expressly stated, but you know your portion of that deal. Let me give you an example. When you leave here today, some of you are going to go to lunch. When you go to lunch, you sit down and you eat lunch. Before you leave, what do? You pay for it, right? Why? There's no contract or there's nothing on the wall that says, I'll feed you, you pay. No, you know your portion of that contract. They're going to feed you, you're going to compensate them. That's an implied contract. You know what you're supposed to do. You pump the gas, you go pay. All right? That's an implied contract. Yes? We good? There also can be bilateral or unilateral. A bilateral contract means both parties. Bi as in bicycle, two wheels, two parties. Bilateral contract, both parties have to sign, or both parties are obligated to act. When I sign a listing agreement, that is a bilateral contract. I agree that I'm going to show the property and make it available. They agree to allow me to have access to the property. It's two parties must act. A unilateral contract is where only one party has to act. In the real estate world, we only have one unilateral contract. Has anybody ever heard of an option? An option? Okay, let's do it this way. Has anybody ever heard of layaway? Yeah. Got that one. In layaway, what do? You go in and you put something in layaway and you promise to go back and buy it. Do you have to go back to buy the property? Or the shirt or the skirt or the... No, you do not have to do that. But if you do, they have to sell it to you. So only one party has to act in a unilateral contract. An option is a legal contract we use in real estate between typically investors, where an investor will say, I want the option to buy your land sometime in the next year. Does that person ever have to go back and buy? No. But if he says, hey, I've decided I'm going to buy, then the seller has to sell it to him. So you have an option or and the option E. Remember the OR and the EE? The option or would be the guy that's selling the property. The option E is the one that took the option or the buyer. So, no, not at all like a rent to own. But we're going to talk about those in this chapter. An option, you don't really take possession. It's just the right to buy at a future date for some price we've agreed on. Okay? So let's say, suppose you're an investor and you hear Walmart's going to buy the land right across the highway. So you go to that farmer and you say, hey, look, I want to buy that land within the next year, and I'll pay you $20,000 an acre for it. and today I'll give you $1,000 for that right. And he says, okay, sometime in the next year, you want to buy it at 20 grand, I'll give you the option, hence the word option, to buy. So now Walmart pops up and says, hey, we're going to buy some land, and we're paying $30,000 an acre for it. This investor runs over, exercises his option, buys the land for 20, sells it to Walmart for 30, and makes money on it. All right? Now, suppose Walmart says, we've decided in this economy we're not going to buy any land in the next year, so we're not building. That guy that has the option never has to go buy. He loses that $1,000, but he's never on the hook to contractually buy that property. Investors use options all the time because it limits the downside to an investor. The most he will ever lose is $1,000 because he's not contractually obligated to buy the property. It's an option to buy. That's where the word comes from. Lease, I hate to use the word rent to own because a lot of times at the end of the lease period, they have an option to buy, all right? But there is no animal called rent to own, and we'll talk about that. So bilateral, both parties. Remember the mutual release from a contract? That's a bilateral. Both parties have to sign. Listing agreements, purchase agreements, deeds, all of that. The only unilateral contract we have is called the option. I've said it 3 times, you might want to know that. It's amazing when I say that how many people start writing. The unilateral contract is the only, the option is the only unilateral contract there is. Go ahead.
Is it that common?
Yeah, it's very common in the investment world. We probably won't get a lot involved in this because typically as a broker, we'll bring buyers and sellers together, right? Options are option or an optionee, and they're usually done in the back room between private individuals because there's really no money in it for us until the deal closes, and what if it doesn't close? So as a broker, we don't get into them a lot. All right. It's like insider trading. Could be. There is a lot of real estate you guys will come to see that doesn't involve us. I mean, there's all the commercial stuff. There's all this option stuff. There's a lot of deals that are done without the aid of a realtor. The for sale by owners. You know, real estate attorneys get involved. I mean, we do probably less than 40% of all the real estate volume of transaction there is. But a lot of us think we're the be-all, end-all. You know, you go talk to a company and they go, well, let's look up your numbers and see how you did. Well, you forget that didn't do anything with commercial. Doesn't record that. Doesn't record anything you've done in another board. So we're not a very small percentage. We're smaller than a lot of people think. Now, when a contract is going to get entered into, there are 2 parties, like the listing agent and the seller. So they say, oh, let's sign a listing agent, create an agency. So they sign the contract. While that contract is being performed, it is called executory status. It's in executory status. Once that contract has been completed, it is said to have been executed. It's complete. So I'll wash your car for $20 today, yes or no? You say yes. Oral agreement, express, both of us know, bilateral. I start washing the car, that contract is being worked on, that's executory status. I finish washing the car, you give me the $20, we're done, the contract is now executed. Means it's complete. All right? Do not confuse that with the verb to execute. Attorneys love that word. I need you to execute this document. That means to sign. All right? They can't just say, come sign this. We want you to execute this document. So executed means complete, executory means it's in the process, and to execute means to sign it. Do not confuse those with the attorney's verb. Any questions?